So 8 years ago, in April of 2017, I was having lunch with one of my friends, and she asked me what I was doing that night. And I said I had tickets to see John Mayer live in Columbus, Ohio, and it was a big deal. This was the very first stadium concert I had been to as like a new guitar player, and I was finally gonna get to see live the guy who inspired about 96% of my licks at the time. And I was so excited for literally everything. I wanted to know what new songs he was gonna be playing, who was gonna be in the band, what were the newest takes on some of my favorite solos. Knowing deep down there was probably going to be one of those concerts that for the next 2 to 3 months I would not be able to shut up about in front of my friends, but not knowing that this would actually be the first time I ever saw a Silver Sky in person. And that's all I could think about for the 3-hour drive there on the way to Ohio State's campus, so I got out of my car ready to hear all of the solos that I had memorized their melodies by heart over the past 2 years. You see, at the time, I don't even know if the name Silver Sky had really been thrown out yet. We were all kind of referring to it on the forums as like that strat style PRS that we were really waiting for that official announcement of. Seeing that thing in person, especially on some of my favorite tracks of all time, was a completely different ballgame. I thought to myself, the minute, nay, the second this thing releases, I'm gonna be first in line and no one is gonna tell me otherwise. But funny enough, that didn't happen because a year later on March 20th, 2018, I was nowhere to be found. It was way out of my price range. It was completely sold out. It really felt like you couldn't walk into a Guitar Center, Sam Ash, you name it, within 6 months of its initial release and actually find one in person to play. But eventually, as with any guitar, as time passed, they became more and more available, and in 2023, I finally got my hands on one. Now, originally I wanted the Midnight Rose because my telly is pink and I have this love for pink guitars, but that was sold out, so I ended up going with the Roxy pink one. I played the mess out of that guitar. I'm talking every single day. Heck, at points I was probably just even staring at it. And kind of like with my American Pro 2 Strat, it's a guitar that, because I was doing so many different videos on so many different guitars, kind of got pushed to the side for a moment. I think that looking back, because of that, I began to get a much more refined perspective on the guitar than when I was in my initial just gawking at this dream instrument phase. And I think because I started to learn more and more about gear, not just on a baseline spec level, the differences between Strats and Tellys, but the differences between individual Strats and what makes people want one or the other, I started to have a much better understanding of a larger question, that being, why would a guitar player, more specifically a Strat player, choose a Silver Sky? And that question didn't just come out of nowhere. Like I said, there are different seasons with different guitars. But oddly enough, just yesterday I was restringing a couple guitars and I decided to pull out this bad boy and I slapped some 10s on there and started playing it through a couple different amps. And that's when I started thinking and feel like I made the big connections that have been rumbling in my head in terms of like that big question. Now, the first reason why a lot of guitar players seem to lean towards the Silver Sky really boils down to the fandom. Every guitar player has been inspired by someone. They want to sound like them, they want to play like them, and in a lot of cases, they want to have the same exact guitar as them. And when you have a guy as big as John Mayer, who a lot of people would argue might be the last big mainstream guitar hero, inevitably, whatever he drops, even outside of guitars, going to things like a Tube Screamer or a Klon, his fans are going to want those pieces of gear. Which leads me to my second reason, which stems in large part from the fans, but also has a lot to do with just anyone who picks up a guitar in general, and that's word of mouth. When you slap the name John Mayer on this thing, it's going to be a guitar that's discussed. But the big thing is when you have different guitar players like a Tom Misch or even bigger pop stars like an Ed Sheeran start using it on a regular basis, that's when the ball really starts rolling. And I think the other big thing, specifically when it comes to word of mouth, has a lot to do with the critiques on a specific guitar. Now, when it comes to this thing, I think the best thing that it has going for it in terms of the critique is that there aren't a lot of really big haters on this guitar. When I look up online reviews, the biggest critiques that I see a lot of people saying who don't like it are usually in reference to the fact that it might be overrated or that the $2,750 price range might be a little high for what you're getting. No one is necessarily calling this a bad guitar. They're alluding to the fact that they think it's not necessarily worth as much as they're selling it for. And if that's really the worst thing that people are saying about it, or maybe that they don't like the way the tuners are looking, you probably have a good sign that it's going to be a guitar that a lot of people get. Because most of those people that I've seen are still saying that it sounds good, which leads me to my third point, and arguably the most important for a lot of people, which is the actual sound of the guitar, like the tone. Because when you're getting any sort of signature going in, you know you're hoping to embrace the specific sound of that player. Now, the Silver Sky doesn't have some magical John Mayer wiring. I mean, it sounds like a Strat, and it can do the John Mayer thing. But also like a Strat, a lot of the reasons why people actually like this is because it can do a lot more than that. And with the 5-way, you're getting a lot of variations. Me specifically, I've used it in a lot of the live gigs I was doing, both when I was using the 5 and the 1. I've also used it for a bunch of country and pop solos that vary wildly from the tone I have in my head, knowing I was using the quote-unquote John Mayer signature. Now, the third reason I think in a lot of ways is just as important as the tone, and that's the aesthetic vibe. And I know, Mike, stop trying to be fancy and just say the way it looks. So the way this guitar looks is the first thing that draws us to any guitar, regardless of what we might like to think at times. And specifically when it comes to this guy right here, it's different enough in the looks department to put it in a separate category than something like a GNL or a Sur, where you're getting pretty much the exact Strat style body shape. You're just choosing which pickups or sometimes which headstock you like better. And it does have the headstock differences like those two, but I think the neck with the bird inlays and also just the slight differences with the body, even from a distance, there's no question and there would be no confusion between this thing and a GNL or a regular Fender. And that's what I think really helps this guitar, because it kind of puts itself in that in-between position of the more traditional Strat style aesthetics or something going as far as like the Music Man Stingrays. Now, we can't leave without talking about the price, which I do think this and every guitar we have to discuss. At $2,750, this is anything but a cheap guitar. And I think because of that, a lot of the hyper fans, this is going to be their number one. And for 99.9% of players, without going into the realm of with PRS, the cores, or the custom shops in terms of Fenders, that's going to be everything they're going to need, both price-wise and spec-wise, to have this be their guitar that they're not going to sell and they're just going to use for the long period of time. Because I think if we're being honest and trying to get the most legitimate guesstimate out of it, they're not going to come out with any crazy upgrades to this that somebody would need to go from a Silver Sky 1 to whatever hypothetical Silver Sky 2 they probably don't have in the works. And like I was saying, even for most touring players, a well set up Silver Sky, a guitar that costs almost $3,000, is going to be everything that they would ever need to use on a professional rig. I think Mayer has even been recorded live saying that he's used just a stock Silver Sky in his live settings, and him being probably the biggest guitarist on the planet, if it's good enough for him, it's probably good for most touring players. So at the end of the day, this is a high-end Strat that was probably always going to be popular. And I think there's a lot of reasons, like we just stated, why Strat players gravitate towards it, pun intended. And I think in just recently doing the research on Reverb's top-selling guitars over the past few years, that's not going to change for a long time. It's a guitar that I've definitively enjoyed playing for the past couple years, but I don't think it matters what I enjoy playing. What matters is what you think. So please answer the big question in the comments for yourself. Do you like the Silver Sky? Do you think it's overrated? Do you think it's one of the most innovative things you've seen? Do you think it's just another Strat copy? Please let me know in the comments. Anyways, thank you so much for watching this video. I got to see Mayer about a month ago at the PRS show for the 40th anniversary, which was absolutely insane. But I got to see a lot of guys there play the Silver Sky. And since then, I think I've subconsciously been thinking a little bit more about different PRS guitars. So it's cool to be able to make this video. If you want to know anything more about my Silver Sky, I got it from the homies at Sweetwater. The links are in the description. Make sure to check it out. It's one of the best ways to support the channel, if that's something you want to do. Or if you're just curious about any of the other gear that I used in this video, make sure to check out those links. Like and subscribe if you had a good time, and most importantly, most important of all, have a good night.